counseling, as well as EAP counseling. So please welcome, let's join me in welcoming Tiffany Atala.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. And I think this will be a fun presentation today. And if you're looking at this strange object next to me, my dog lovers out there, Bay, come here. Let's see if I can get a face. There she is. Bay is actually a service dog. She works with clients through trauma therapy. She has 43 commands, and right now she just wants to sit and be in our presentation. So hopefully we have some dog lovers out there. Feel free to say hi in the chat. We are going to be talking about effectively coping with change. I'm going to go ahead in a moment here and share my screen so you can see this PowerPoint live. All right. So some of you right now are thinking, well, I got this one down because I am a change maker. And maybe you're the person that likes change. In fact, maybe back when you were dating, or maybe you're dating now, you were the one that liked to be spontaneous and coming up with fun things to do. You didn't want to keep it monotonous, and therefore you're the change maker. And then there's some people that are probably logged in today because they actually need some help effectively coping with change, or somebody in their family is struggling with that. So as we go through this PowerPoint today, we're going to talk about some tips and tricks to deal with it after we identify what change looks like. You have the option right now of scanning this if you'd like. Megan already mentioned that this is going to be recorded and it's going to be sent out to you, but we just want to make sure that you are able to access the material at your leisure. So today we're going to cover a lot of things in a short amount of time. I promise at the end to make some time for us to go through some question and answer and see what everyone's thinking about what we heard. And maybe there's some future directions or topics you want to hear. Please feel free to bring those up. Before we get there, we're going to identify just what are stress reactions and what do most people do when they're going through a period or a season of change. Then we're going to analyze the behaviors associated with it. So as we're in this analysis mode, I'm going to make the recommendation that you take some notes on your phone or you jot on a piece of paper what you see out of yourself. If you're good with those behaviors, keep them. But if you're not, let's throw them away and insert some new ways of coping and handling things. Then we're going to establish resiliency. So we're going to look at those ways we're going to do better in the future, and then ultimately develop our own plans to cope. I think I'm that girl covering my face with her hands. No, I'm just kidding. Admittedly, I will tell you that I'm not always the best at change. And like I said, some of you on here probably agree with me, it's hard. Oftentimes it's that idea that we think it's going to be an attack on self. Change is bad. I liked the way things were, even if it's not perfect. Why does this have to change? Most often this happens with things like work. Maybe you have children that are leaving and cleaving and they're moving out of your house. And so the whole family system is changing. Maybe you have to move out of your apartment or your home. Possibly your job is asking you to change. And even if this change is wanted and desired, like maybe you're really excited about your daughter getting married. In fact, you're going to inherit a son. That's exciting. But with that, you know, the dynamics going to change. So even changes we're excited about can be challenging. Things like promotion, I'm really looking forward to that next job or that next position. But with that comes the discomfort and leaving and letting go. So sometimes some grief. So ultimately, there's usually the first slap in the face shock. Oh, I didn't know that it would be like this, or is this really happening? And then unfortunately, a lot of us live in denial for a while till the change actually happens. I think back to college, which was a million moons ago, and I didn't pack until the last minute. And to me, when I see these young college students that are out having fun at the beach the last possible days, or in Idaho at the lake, right? And it's hours before they're leaving and they're finally freaking out about what they pack, they are in full denial. Some other reactions that you might see is actually anger. And oftentimes people try and place blame on things that aren't actually related. Sometimes they'll project their emotions onto somebody else. Like, why are you acting out at me right now? When in reality, that person may not be acting out or being snappy with them. It's them feeling that way and outwardly projecting it on to someone they love. Usually anger is directed towards situations or people closest to it. And then I'll also say something that's probably very familiar, which is when we're angry, if we're people who aren't comfortable with anger, we tend to displace it on people that we love the most. I bet some of you have been a recipient of that. Anxiety. What's next? How's this going to serve me or not? How am I going to get through this? Sometimes with anxiety, we're looking forward with worry about the future, but it only takes a second to flip back to a little bit of depression from the past. Woulda, shoulda, coulda done something different. So right now, we're even talking about changes that are seemingly catastrophic, but some of you may be getting ready to cope with changes that aren't that big on paper, but are really causing you stress. And then I added this last one right before we started today, which is overwhelm. Because in counseling sessions lately, I've been talking with so many people that feel like they're doing more with less, and they're not really equipped, whether it's in their job, they got promoted, and now they're going to be in this new role. And internally, they have a little bit of imposter syndrome, meaning, how did I even get in this position? This is a total change for me. Am I capable of doing what they're asking me to do? Or what we're supposed to do is just so magnanimous. I don't know how I'm going to serve the need of all of this. It's too great. So these are some things that come up, those feelings of overwhelm, anxiety, anger, denial, when we're trying to cope with change. Well, we know that change is often very stressful. Okay. And then we have a lot of changes at once. People tend to not cope as well. And counseling, I'll say to people, guess what? We're doing a no change stance right now, kind of as a joke, facetiously, but oftentimes that's what we need, is someone to call out and say, it's okay to put the kibosh on having so much change at once. It's okay to address what needs to be changed in the here and now and say, I'm not going to make those kind of decisions yet. There's too much that's out of balance. An example of that for those listening right now would be, let's say that you have adult children that are leaving, they're going off to college, or one of them's moving and they were a big part of your household nuclear family system. And yet you and your spouse aren't getting along, and behind the scenes have been thinking about something big, like a separation. You might say, you know what? Let's see them off. I'm not going to make a decision on my marriage right now. I'm in a no change stance until I'm okay grieving the loss of them moving. It is absolutely okay to choose the type of change you slow down when other types of change force you to deal with them in quick time. Okay, so understanding what's too much stress. Change can lead to people feeling all of these physical symptoms. And we're going to talk about our body's response on a higher level to that stuff. Some people cope with change by eating their feelings, generally snapping at other people. But what you will notice is that when you are stressed, if you are stressed by it, you'll start to feel that tension. A lot of people say up in their shoulders, in their chest. Ask yourself right now, where do you hold your tension? And when you think about a change recently, where do you feel it in your body? That's always different for everyone, but our body has been designed to let us know when there's signs of emotional or physical danger. So it's often that we feel those things in our body. As you're going through this PowerPoint, I want you to be thinking about what is changing in your life right now, because you're going to get so much more out of this training if it's real to you. So let's look at stress. Change often causes stress. Distress is when people are falling apart. We are very familiar with that, most of us. Stress in general, that word gets thrown around a lot. Oh, I'm just so stressed right now. This is causing me stress. Watch for where you use the word stress. I read an article about people studying for tests. And this was back when I was taking my license exam, gosh, years ago now. And I remember thinking, I need to change the psychology of how I view this test as stressful. And the article was excellent. They'd done a bunch of research and they found that if you told yourself that you're excited and not that you're anxious and stressed, you kept saying, I'm really excited. I'm really excited to see what I can demonstrate. I'm really excited about this next phase. Just by changing the language that you said externally and heard internally, it increased your feelings of satisfaction, of positivity, and then ultimately the outcome. So more mental clarity and performance. So pretty cool. Where do we use stress or that word too much? I challenge you this week to take that word out and try and insert a different, more functional word. And then finally is eustress. Okay, so thinking of a time of eustress for most people is planning a really positive event. I counsel so many couples that are getting ready to get married, and I chuckle a little bit because that was one of the most stressful times of my life. And those of you out there listening that have planned a wedding or have family members that you've been a part of, you notice how family starts fighting about the little things, the seemingly unimportant things. Can kids come and eat a full menu versus chicken nuggets? Things that don't even seem important. And that tends to cause a lot of eustress, or even positive stress about it looking the way you wanted, or just maybe being in front of so many people. It's just a burden that gets carried on your backpack of bricks, right? When really there's a lot of excitement behind it. So eustress isn't all bad, but it can lead to stress and distress depending on how it's interpreted and what comes with it. I'm a fast talker, so I'm going to slow down a little bit. I think I definitely give you more than 450 words a minute. I know we have smart people. So if there are any questions, don't hesitate to send it out in the chat, and I'll respond, or Megan, as we go. So let's talk about stress in our body. Everybody's body interprets stress differently. And I learned this years ago, and I've mentioned this maybe before, because my body likes to tell me that I'm fine. I do a lot of stress management, and my body will say, I'm fine. Don't have a stomach ache, have so much on my plate, and I still say I'm fine until I get shingles. And shingles is my body's response to saying that was too much. So for some of you, your body is very, very sensitive, and it can tell you a lot of things, but maybe my body isn't telling me I'm fine. It's possible that I've turned it off and just said, I've got so much going on, I'm not going to listen to it. For those of you out there that carry a lot, you're the person in the family that likes to take on a lot, or maybe you need to show up at this job that you're doing and working to provide for your family. So you just say, ain't nobody got time for that, right? You have become out of tune with what your body is telling you about stress. Short term, all right. Yes, you have a headache. Maybe you take some Advil or you do something, but long term, what we know is that headache can lead to not only physical symptoms, but also to mental health problems of feeling bogged down. The headache may be associated with other serious health problems. And ultimately, there might be other things going on that we'll have to investigate if we stop taking care of ourselves. I think this is interesting because if we look at the slide, it reminds me to say that we know the sympathetic nervous system, which is associated with anytime we feel like we're attacked or we're in emotional or physical danger, that sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, keeps us going with our stress response. Heart beats faster, different hormones are released, including adrenaline and cortisol. But the negative to that is a lot of times we're not getting enough time where that parasympathetic nervous system is kicked in for healthy things like positive digestion, good sleep, even fertility. All right, acute stress. Acute stress means temporary. Yes, I know it's really tough right now, but it's going to get better. As we've been changing some departments, acutely, that's stressful because there's good changes happening, but shift and learning new ways we're shifting things takes place. But I know it's temporary. But let's look at that. Acute stress can take a toll if we don't know when it's going to end, or we can't see a positive foreseeable future. Then it becomes chronic. Chronic stress is the stuff that really tends to lead to health problems because a lot of times we get used to it. It's almost like I can take that and I can take that and I can juggle those 5 plates. And then it's not until one more thing happens. What is that? The straw that breaks the camel's back that we talk about, before you realize I was dealing with chronic stress and juggling too much for too long. So a check-in for self today. Your list. What are some of the chronic stressors going on in your life? Is there anybody that is sick in your family? Are there any financial obligations that are new or a struggle for you? What are you doing that is a time suck, meaning you just don't have that much time to take care of you, doing self-care? What is filling in all of your blanks? Oops, I skipped you ahead. My fault. I'm going backwards, okay? Moving on from that. Acute and chronic are different, but there is this point on this curve of fatigue. So we do need some stress to perform. If we don't care about anything and it's just la-di-da, we won't have any inertia. But there's this point where it becomes beyond optimal and we start to get exhausted. And the more exhausted we are, the more we break down. Recently, I saw a chiropractor who actually has a PT background. And in no way I'm touting this is right, wrong, but I thought it was really interesting what he taught me. And he said, when you're actually mentally tired and sleep deprived, and then you go out and do something like clean your horse stalls or lift a heavy box in the garage, your muscles forget to actively recruit to protect your spine, and you're more likely to get hurt. Isn't it amazing how the human body takes on all of these stresses, but is completely impacted, and it can be harmful? Stress can be positive. We mentioned eustress, or we mentioned just a little bit of stress creating motivation. That's great. Ever get really excited about something? It's been what you wanted. And then when you actually think about the change, it's where you have to take into account coping. So everybody has a different way of reacting to stress. Some people actually kind of like it. It's this level of, like the word I used earlier, which is excitement. They want things to change, or they want to conquer what was a stressful, tangled situation and iron it out. We have a coworker, and she's pretty darn amazing. And as much as things get stressful, and she'll verbalize that, I think she really likes operationally figuring it out. It's like a puzzle. Any of those Sudoku people or puzzle people, you might actually like it. It just depends how you look at it. And then I'll say the words you put to it, like excitement. We know there's a mind-body connection, and I spoke about that earlier. But man, there are other ways that our body tells us that something is wrong. Things like ulcers or our blood pressure. You can even feel your pulse throughout the day if you just take it and recognize that it's more elevated when you feel like you're carrying stress and things keep getting thrown at you. So let's just take a moment to pause as we're right here, right now. And I'm going to ask you for 3 breaths. I can't see you, but I'm just going to ask that you participate and see if that has even a 1% impact on you getting recentered. All right, moving back on. I think with COVID and everything else, a lot of us have taken more notice of our bodies and trying to stay ahead of things with not getting sick. So just be able to recognize that if we don't manage stress, you're more likely to have that weakened immune system. When we think about your work or before a shift day, what can you do to get more sleep? What is the optimal amount of sleep? I was listening to a motivational speaker online who's very popular, and he was saying, get those 6 hours of sleep. And then I was thinking, gosh, I recently listened to another physician talking about health, and he was saying that 6 hours is really not optimal sleep. It's really more like 7 to 8 hours with more REM time. So what can you do to change and get enough sleep? I'll tell you one thing that we've changed is Netflix binges. I can get on a show and really get excited, and finally things are quiet with the kids asleep. So if you already say, hey, I really can only see this many shows and not this much time, then you're more likely to get that sleep. Also, stop it an hour prior to you going to bed, at minimum a half an hour prior, because we don't want you to be getting the blue light from the screen. And it's good for you to have a different wind down protocol for sleep so that it's restful. Commuting. What can you do in your commute so it's not so painful if you have one? I'm a country girl and I live in Southern California now. So I'll tell you, the commute taxes me to a level that I think most people around here don't relate with. So I found that if I can listen to interesting podcasts, call friends that I've been missing, and feel like that time is effective, then I'm a lot less like feel stressed. And then finally, plan time for you to sit in the morning and drink your coffee or read a Bible passage if that's something important to you, or just take a moment to sit outside and watch the morning start, whatever it takes so that you have a cushion with your start and a cushion before you walk into the office for the day. Deep breathing exercises. Hey, we already practiced 3 minutes. People will say, just relax and breathe. And often that makes people really irritated, right? But man, if you really track your pulse or your heart rate before you take 3 optimal breaths, expanding out that belly, and then completely releasing and sinking down, 3 breaths can completely alter your mood shift and slow things down. It'll also reduce your resting heart rate for most people. 3 breaths. So I'm actually trying to implement between every hour that I just do 1 minute of breathing. And it might even be 15 seconds of breathing if I'm doing 3 breaths. I'm going to encourage you to do the same. How could you make your lunch break a little bit better? Those of you that are guilty, like I am, of trying to work through lunch, I bring all the food, I keep eating, get things done with this idea that I'll get home sooner to the family. And then at the end of the day, when I get home, I don't bring my best self home. So even if this is a huge change for you listening right now, think about maybe having a 15-minute time that you're really going to sit and mindfully eat or not be on your phone. Or maybe you finish eating and you are looking at funny memes or whatever on your phone, but it's time for you throughout your workday. Meditation is often seen as this big, long thing that we don't have time for. And there's a cool app called Insight Timer. It's free. And you can actually just do a 3-minute meditation and a neck relaxation meditation or a being present right now meditation. So there's some really powerful things. What I do know about Idaho is it's some of the most beautiful land. And boy, do you guys have clouds and sunsets. So make sure that you get some fresh air. It's so good for you throughout your workday. Exercise, even for our non-exercisers, well, guess what? It's not just about physical. It actually shifts your mental health. I recently did an online national training and it was for first responders. And one of the gentlemen on the training said, I'm never going to meditate. I don't meditate. It's not my thing. Respectfully, I said, absolutely. I understand people do these things different. But what he did say is that going for a run for him just cleansed his mind. You know what? That's what we needed. That's meditative. That movement, the sound, outdoors. There's so many great ways to improve your mental health through exercise. So see what kind of exercise is fun. Even if it's roller skating or bike riding, just find something because it all counts. Burnout. Ever said, I am burned out? There's an assessment called the Professional Quality of Life Scale, the PROQOL, PROQOL, and it's free online. And what they're trying to do is put it out there so people can assess how they're doing in terms of burnout. Burnout as a helper and compassion fatigue. I don't think I need to tell you what burnout is. If you've ever felt it, it's like you've lost your love for what you're doing in your work life anymore. And there's just a total dark negative cloud at the way we look at things. And every new thing that comes in that's change or transition or difficult can feel like an attack or like I just can't even deal with it anymore. Unfortunately, when you're burned out, it really affects just getting through the day. And oftentimes, there's all these expectations of what you thought a job would be. And the reality of it is what's really making you feel down. And then there's a point of feeling from burnout. I'll hear people say, I feel so burned out and I feel so stuck. Like I have to stay in this job or this is everything I thought I wanted to do. But then when we come back out of that, their thinking is that there's nothing else rather than like, how do I take care of the moment I'm in so I'm less burned out? And then we can evaluate other options and not feel stuck. Because if you're burned out, your mind isn't in the right state to even make those changes. First thing is getting a little bit of balance back in your life. If it's just for a season with the load, most people can handle it. But if it seems like it's unending, like all these screens open right here, then that's when people tend to feel like it's constant and it's not going to get better and lack of hope. It leads to all kinds of health problems, as you can read. Burnout, and the analogy I'll give for this is one that I learned. You ever heard about the frog, that you could put a frog in warm water and slowly increase the heat and the frog wouldn't sense what was coming on and eventually it would cook and boil. But if you put the frog all in already hot boiling water, it would jump out. And so for some of us, we're the frog. And we haven't even realized that we're in this water and it's getting hotter and hotter and hotter. And then by the time we say, SOS, I'm burning out, unfortunately, it's really, really hard to get back to a healthy place. Please reach out and get some support. Something about just talking can make you feel better, just being heard. And I'll say a professional that doesn't have biases and is going to listen and paraphrase what they hear so that you can clarify what you're thinking, maybe try on some different perspectives, really helpful. So lots of causes of burnout, okay? And then I made some notes under here of things that you can do. So when you're really overwhelmed and you've been dealing with burnout, I think it's important to first get back to what is most important to you. And we can't do this all at once. And when you're overwhelmed, even hearing this probably makes you feel overwhelmed. So step one, write a list of your values. Some of you almost have a mantra in your mind or a shield and you know what they are. Then prioritize based on your need of values right there, okay? Then if you're going to change something, each of those that you put on the list is going to need some time and attention. Next to it, write down how much time you have to allocate right now. Because sometimes your priority has to be finances so you can support the family, which leads into the job. And so maybe that takes a huge chunk of time, whether you like it or not. The time off you have, let's make it more intentional. Let's make it more about you. It's not selfish. Let's make it more about those you love. That is important. Talked about meditation. You don't have to be some master meditator, but even just calming your muscles, stretching, doing deep breaths keeps you from getting into sympathetic override, activates that parasympathetic to take care of your health, okay? So even if you do the hour thing, like I mentioned, 3 breaths, every hour, you're going to feel different by the end of the day. Any activities that you have right now that don't add value, cross them off. I just sat with a couple and they are super parents, or they're trying to be. And so they've signed their kids up for an activity every single day of the week. Doesn't that sound like Southern California a little bit? So that being said, they want to do this because they didn't have it growing up. But when we sat down and we made a list of everything going on, they were talking about it. They said, my kid doesn't even like this. They're not even interested in violin. I'm forcing this one. And when we kind of started eliminating the things that aren't adding value to their experience in their present life and made them permanent chauffeurs, they started to feel so much happier. And the kids were too. So take a moment to maybe eliminate some things or put some things on pause right now. Delegate. Sometimes in our life, if you're a person who's been through struggle, or you're just really dedicated hard worker, or I guess option C, you're a little bit OCD about how things get done, you've taken on a lot. And maybe you're someone that likes to just get it done yourself. But oftentimes there's other people that would help if you let them know, or actually could learn to do something. Sometimes those are our teenagers or our kids. And if we spend a little time teaching a man to fish, it's really, really helpful, even if you could do a better job and it's something you've done your whole life. Let's look at some things that we could delegate off our list right now. I've actually been working on that at work, and I can tell you how much I absolutely appreciate my employees even more. And I'm just seeing so much more value they have. And I think that the relationship is reciprocal. So let's look at ways we can delegate. Oh, multitasking. I taught a course yesterday, so my example for this will be that. I taught a course yesterday, 8 hours, and anytime you teach a group of people, it's stressful. Those of you that love to public speak, maybe you don't relate. But I got home and thought, this was so fun. 8 hours of just focusing on them, what they needed to learn, one thing, the room of 50 people or whatever it was. And then I started checking that and thinking, what was that about? It's because I wish I was an octopus with 8 arms or maybe more, because I'm constantly multitasking, and it felt so good to just be present in that moment and fully engaged. One of the things we do with Shift Wellness is we do retreats. We have a restoration reflection retreat. We have a bunch of different kinds of retreats. And I find that going on those retreats is really, really good because you get back into being focused and then goal setting and things like that. So maybe right now you can't go on some huge retreat and you have to multitask, but I do ask that after this class, you take 5 minutes and you sit down and you write down everything going on, your priorities, the time you're going to allocate to those things, what you're going to delegate, and where and when you're going to be present each day. And maybe you put your phone on timeout like I have to do at dinner time. I put it on the charger, and that is my 1 hour to focus with the kids. But find a way that you're going to be present sometimes so you don't feel like you multitask all the time. I think I gave you that already. I like to-do lists. Some of people don't. Biggest thing with to-do lists is that after you write them, you don't just keep it all up in here, and that you go back and get the satisfaction of checking things off or moving them in your calendar to another day. Nowadays, people want instant responses. And so by the end of the day, some of us have 20-something text messages on our phone. And if you don't schedule time and then you commute home and you have other people that need you, then it just adds up and piles up. So actually build in time for emails and phone calls into your workday. And we've talked about prioritizing. Other things that can lead to burnout is when you feel like expectations are so high. You know who creates these expectations oftentimes? It's actually sometimes you. Sometimes you have this idea of yourself or these standards for yourself that you may never meet. Maybe they came from having a parent that had really high expectations for you, or maybe it's just you. Maybe you're someone that's an achiever, or you're just never feeling like you're good enough. But if your expectations are so high for you, and yet you're graceful and kind with other people making mistakes and maybe not meeting them, let's look at that. Do you treat yourself with the same self-love as you do for other people? Sometimes we have to majorly lower our expectations just so we can succeed, and then we can start raising the bar incrementally. Silly example, but when we've been out of the fitness routine, some people will have a season where they're injured or it's holidays and things get busy, and then they get back to working out. And if they can't do what their personal trainer from 3 years ago said, which was you need to exercise 4 or 5 days a week for at least 45 minutes, then they just say, I'm not going to do it at all. I'm a failure. I'm not getting back on my fitness track. Well, what if you made your expectation, I'm going to move 20 minutes, 3 to 5 days a week? And I'm going to set a base foundation for being well. Or I'm going to meditate or calm my mind for 3 minutes a day. After a week, you could probably do it. Consistency would pay off. So let's look at where we can change some of the expectations, and then also be aware of who puts them on us, whether it's ourselves or someone else. Other things about burnout is that sometimes that there's detached concern. Okay. So sometimes we actually have to do that. And other times we don't. Other times it's important to stay present with it, is what I meant to say. And sometimes we need to detach from it. An example of that is when you see things going wrong and it's really not in your lane at work, and you see other things going wrong, maybe in the company, or things that you wish had happened sooner. If you keep getting upset about all of those things or interjecting yourself in all of them rather than staying with what's in front of you, you can tend to feel even more overwhelmed and burned out. Okay, the other part is, what if the situation feels personal, like nobody's listening to me, or if we had just done that? So if you can separate from it and make it less personal, it often will help you detach a little bit from the burnout and the overwhelm. Like, this is what's happening with change at work, and it's not about me, it's about the system. And I'm going to be, what people tell me here, I work with some Marines and they say Semper Gumby. I'm going to be Semper Gumby. Okay, and then compartmentalizing. I think of the waffle box. The people that are really good at compartmentalizing like a waffle, like this box is me answering emails. This box is me managing people. This box is my family. Sometimes when we do that for a while, even if you set timers on your phone to match to getting that stuff done, we can start to conquer that. Coworkers are great sources of support. Again, look for the healthy few and not the people that are going to collude about the negativity or be very anxious and worried. Because if you're stressed, and using that scary word, stressed, anxious, and then you go talk with other people, sometimes that brings up the anxiety. Look for people that look like they have healthy regulation and balance for your support network. And then beyond that, seek people that are already there to talk with you. They're professionals in mental health, and let them be a part of your coping plan. You've got enough on your plate here. More in the burnout. I'm just going to say on this slide, I want you to think about listening to your body again and being aware if you've tuned out from your body. I mentioned that I've kind of tuned out because we want to move from burnout to what we call balance. Depression. So anxiety, we've talked a lot about anxiety. I wish we could call anxiety excitement, but we'd be lying a little bit to ourselves. Depression is often unrecognized. For those of you that think of depression as I'm under the covers, the day is dark, and I want to pull them over my head, that may not be the way that everybody represents depression, okay? It manifests different for different people. Sometimes it's about low energy and just concentration issues, yet you still keep going to work. Or anhedonia, where you just really don't like or have interest in the things you used to love to do. Let's check that and look at that if that's coming up. Post-traumatic stress disorder, hey, that can actually heighten or impact how quickly we get to being burned out. Because if your cup is already pretty full and you didn't realize it, maybe you had a terrible childhood and there's some awful things that happened that were traumatic, and you think, you know what? I'm a move forward and keep going, keep your head down and keep moving. But you didn't realize that your stress responses are dulled and that you already have your backpack pretty heavy with some old bricks. You're more likely to get more stressed out and burned out. And it's also likely that you have triggers that are unconscious. So things that maybe the way people talk to you, or the tone of voice, or the room, or things that feel threatening and traumatic. And so again, with change might be a lot more difficult as well. Addiction can come out of burnout. Addiction can come out of trying to change, and addiction can come out of trying to cope with something or numb. Again, addiction can somewhat be heritable, right? Because genetically, some people are more predisposed to developing an addiction to others. And oftentimes people increase things like alcohol use, and then later on find out that they've headed down a really terrible path. We want to make sure that you seek help for this if you're noticing this. And then watch that if you're going through some changes in your life, are you turning to alcohol as your quick, easy way to feel better? Grief. Grief is often associated with loss that, like death, like loss that we can all say, wow, that is terrible. I've recently lost a really good friend. There is a lot of grief, and I can actually see how I reacted the first 4 weeks since getting this information. I am feeling a little better, and I'm noticing that change. But I also recognize that the grief that I've experienced when I've lost people does also mirror some grief when there's been a separation from a friendship, a little bit, someone moving away, leaving a job that I loved. So notice how the grief can be about other things, even things that I mentioned earlier you might have wanted. Maybe you wanted to move into a different city or house, and now that you're there, there's a lot of things you miss, and there's a lot of sadness about the people and situations. So let's look at, am I grieving anything in my life, and is that affecting me coping with change? Taking it down a very serious path, okay? The suicides in Idaho are really high right now, and we need to be very aware of this. So when people are struggling, let's ask those uncomfortable questions. I've been impacted by suicide, as many of you have, and I know it is heartbreaking. So let's look when we see people struggling, or we know there's some changes coming in their life. Let's reach out and be the person that sets themselves up to be a part of the support system or asks the difficult questions. All right, all of that said, let's look at how we could be healthy, okay? Actually, before you even look at this, what's going well in your life? What's going well? I asked myself, what's going well today? You know what? My kids are actually healthy. They're at their school. My son is no longer in kindergarten, and he's a cool big kid now. That's going well today. Now that I said that, I'll probably get a call from the nurse at lunch that he scraped his knee or something, but all joking aside, what's going well? Okay, when things are going well, you often feel like you're coping through things better too. There's less stress bearing you down, and you'll notice that you're healthier overall, mentally and physically. Some ways that you know you're coping healthy, you can actually read through 1 through 7 and do a quick assessment with me. Are you doing well in these areas? How are your communication skills? Give yourself a letter grade, A, B, C, D, hopefully not F. Okay. How are you doing with effectively hearing people? I would change that to effective hearing skills. And that means all of the listening components. You know, does your wife or husband say, yeah, you hear me clearly, or you get me? Or are you making space to listen to your kids and what's going on with them? Would your coworkers say that they feel heard? Would your friends say that you've reached out and that you're doing more listening than solving their problems or talking? How are you making decisions? When we're overwhelmed, there's too many. Sometimes we fail to make any at all. Are there any that need to be made soon? Give yourself a letter grade or make some notes. Critical thinking is pretty hard to do when there's too many screens open. Ask yourself if that's happening. We've spoken about mindfulness. Use the word meditation. Are you in tune with your body and your health? And what are you doing to increase this? 6 could be anything that's in your self-care box. Okay. Anything that is important to you. Exercise. It could be having time to read a book. It could be making time for you as a couple, whatever you think. And number 7 is a little bit away from jaded and a lot more open. How am I looking at caring for others and the greater good than just myself? If you would give yourself an average of a B, then you're rocking it. There's little adjustments you can make after this presentation today. If you're looking at 1 through 7 and we're somewhere in the C range, I think there are a few improvements we can make, right? And let's work towards a B. And if you're giving yourself a big F and you're not being hypercritical, it's time to spend a little more time maybe getting some, what I call an oil change, getting some supportive therapy to clean out, make sure that the engine's going to run well. And the great thing is that AAIA can provide that and has some excellent clinicians. Let's talk about decision making, because we know that that's part of change. Sometimes you have to decide to make a decision. Sometimes decisions are forced on you. We know that decision making is impacted when we're burned out or overwhelmed. So let's look at our styles in general. There's the people that really hate choices. You ever get ready to go to dinner with someone and you say, where would you like to go? You pick. And they really hate to make the choice. I'm not that person. You ask me where I want to go dinner, I'm going to give you an answer. But some people, that's not their case. We also have people who are what we call satisficers and maximizers. And this is not in the PowerPoint, but satisficers like to come up with a set of criteria. Okay, we need it to be this much money in this place and done by this date for fixing the plumbing. And once they hit all the markers of their criteria, they make the decision and they get really excited about making the decision. They love making decisions happen. And then some of you might be like my husband and I. I'm the satisficer. He's the maximizer. I love to make the decision, but sometimes I forget to create enough good criteria before I put a new roof on the house or what have you. I know this can get really dangerous. He's a maximizer and he just gets really into the research, from the cost to what's the best way. Should we put on solar? And it goes so many directions. And so in your relationships, you might find that the two are together. It's like a Reese's peanut. Irritate. One of you wants to be quick to make decisions, and the other likes they've met criteria that we didn't even know existed, and often focus on safety too. Moving forward, reactive decision makers are those that kind of fire hosing. Oh no, we got to right now. They just make a decision on the drop of a dime, and they also like to control the direction. Okay, and it's not always the best decision. Ultimately, we want to be proactive. We want to know that a decision needs to be made and then go through all the steps to feel empowered in making it, looking at all of the criteria and the things good about the outcome. The response was chosen. Oh my goodness, satisficers, maximizers again. I was in this PowerPoint and I reviewed this a bit. For the family decision or for the work decision, and then the satisficers go to get it done. They can feel really good. Or gave the maximizer the chance to set criteria and do a bunch of research with them, and then the satisficer went to go work and find it and comes back If the maximizer takes the target and changes the criteria, lots of arguing. This can happen in the workplace too. Connection can heal a lot of things. And with change comes a need for connection. So I'm going to say, if you're moving, if you're changing environments, the first thing I want you to be focusing on is, how are you going to meet new people? How are you going to make that environment feel healthy and whole? If you're moving somewhere new, maybe it's the kids' school system or the sports they sign up for. Maybe it's going to a new church that looks exciting and interesting. Make sure to spend some time researching all of those things before you get there. And then if things are going well, notice that you feel so much better when you're making time to decompress with people and in places that make you feel whole. I love talking about this concept of learned resilience. Okay, we are very resilient. And it ultimately takes using some skills and keeping hope alive, even if we're having tough days and hope is low. So keep in mind, if you can just have enough hope that it's going to get better, and then apply some of the skills and techniques, even when you're tired, the next day might be a little bit better. If you're struggling with this and you're ready for someone to be your co-captain on it, again, I'll go back to what I call as the oil change or the tune-up. Get a good therapist through AAA. You guys get those sessions and they're free. I'd say use them. They're allocated for you. And having someone that's a trained coach and can sit with you and put on different hats is really helpful. I've learned that I like to do this game where I try on different hats. So for instance, if I were going to take a new job role, I would try on the hat of, okay, in this role, what would it feel like? What would it feel like in the morning when I get there? Where would it be different location-wise? Who would I talk to at lunch? What do I think would be some of the best parts of it and some of the stressors? And I try it on for a day or two and I take a bunch of notes. And then I try on the hat again. If I stay in this job, what would be some of the things that I would miss, or in this job role? What would be some of the opportunities I'd be looking at and wanting for? What would be some of the positives of just remaining in the same space and feeling comfortable? So I'm also going to recommend you try on my hats policy and you share it with someone you care about. Share it with a good listener in your life. If not, find a therapist. All right, so the journey ahead is really, really important. The path ahead, I'm giving you a bunch of different tools. You can read through the list and see which of these would help you. Definitely finding one good thing to focus on. Every time you bring up a bad, I like to say 5 good for 1 bad, but focus on at least 1 good for 1 bad. If you're struggling with the current situation you're in, it's okay to distract or dissociate for a little bit. It's okay to read a book and get lost in an awesome story, or watch a movie for a bit, but make sure that you're putting time and energy into what's here and now. Come back to it so you can implement some strategies to reduce your stress. Healthy mindset, super important. I'm just giving you some more ways to cope, okay? We talked in the beginning about start by identifying your values today. So if you did the homework in the beginning of our class, you wrote down what are your values and in what order of importance. When they're challenged, this is where we start to struggle. Also, if you're someone that's been trying to have healthy boundaries, for instance, let's say that you don't want your in-laws coming over unannounced and you let them know kindly, and then they do this and they push them. If you're having any struggle internally, it's because people aren't respecting your boundaries. Find a way to reassert your needs and get some support of that. I talked about inserting a moment of calm throughout the day. For those that are carrying a huge load of stress, let's insert a few. The CARES mitigation method, it's just an acronym. I'm going to tell it to you right now, so my note takers will remember it. But if you forget it, you can just keep the basics, which is the first one is check your body. Right now, head to toe, where do you feel tension? And what is your body telling you about stress or how you're dealing with stress and change? Access your emotions is A. What do I actually feel? Tired? Hungry? Anxious? I don't know. Disrespected? What are the words you're feeling? Okay. R means regulation techniques, fancy term, but just what can you do? What can you implement to calm down and become more centered? Maybe it's listening to music for a minute, just 3 minutes of just a song with rhythms that you like. Melodies are really good for the brain. Evaluate what you just tried is your E. And the last one is more self-care later today because there's a lot going on, or make a point to do support. So later today, I'm going to text a friend I haven't talked to in a long time and set up a phone call. I just do one a day usually, right? Please look at these things, these ways you can get back to a positive headspace. Resilience comes by practicing it. So we can learn all these things and hear about all these tools, but it's not until we actually start practicing it that it becomes a behavior. How long does it take to make new behaviors? Your quick answer. It should be about 6 months of consistency before we have those new behaviors, okay? So we're going to have setbacks, okay? Setbacks can be a setup, but if you implement things with support, you're going to get stronger and become more resilient. I talked about thought patterns. I used the example, the baby example of words, where I talked about earlier using the word anxiety or stress, but then switching it to excitement. So let's think about when you slow down your mind and you're feeling the way you feel and you access your thoughts, what is positive thought? Or maybe even a mantra you could say right now. Today, my mantra is, today is going to be very productive. My mantra for home tonight, because I'm going to be with the kiddos by myself when my husband's working, I really look forward to reading with them in bed. I know it's a moment in time, so tonight is going to feel really connected. Say those things mindfully a few times, whatever yours are that you're coming up with right now. Some things we can't control. And for those of us that are desperately trying to control things, guess what? You may not be a control freak. This might have come out of having bad things happen. This might have come out of you training yourself, or maybe you're even a responder where you show up on people's worst day. So you think, gosh, if I can catastrophize and think, what is the worst that can happen? I can plan ahead. I want you to step back in your personal life and say, there are things that I'm powerless about. It's okay. How can I feel like I can take care of the things right in front of me and do them my best and let go with acceptance of other things? Ultimately, stay in the present as much as you can, because when we get too anxious or elevated, we start to not feel well. So if we start to feel that shift in our body, come back to recentering with some of the techniques we've explored. I've talked about priorities, okay? So I'm not going to spend much more time on that. Your work environment. There's this thing called traumagenesis, and it's the stress level and the trauma and the impact of the negativity going on. We can actually absorb it. That's not a good thing. So how can you make it more fun with your coworkers? How can you look at someone next to you and say, hey, let's have a planning meeting and just to check in for everyone, your high and your low. Or let's communicate and just make sure we clarify goals this week. Maybe you're a leader and it would feel really good to do that. Any of us that are anxious or you operate in that anxious mind, sometimes you start storytelling about the worst happening. This person doesn't appreciate me. They don't get back to me on time because they don't think what I'm saying is right. Look at where you've created belief systems that may or may not be true, and let's not assume the worst. All right, as we come to a close today, I want us to think about our boxes of life. What's in that box? What fills you? Do you like all the things that fills up your life, your time, your energy? Maybe it's so much time at work and you really wish it was gardening or fishing. Maybe it was that you want to have a new relationship, but you just feel like you don't have the energy. Let's change that box. Start pulling some things out. Let's put some things that we want to put on pause and save for another day, and some things that we need to donate and give away. We know that wellness is multidimensional. There's so many areas of wellness. In fact, a couple of months ago, we did a whole presentation on wellness. So how are you serving yourself in all of these areas of your life? Yeah, this is not the wheel that I hope to have. If anything, I hope you leave today very motivated to get on rebalancing your wheel. With every positive social interaction, we don't realize this, but our self-esteem improves, okay? And we can find them anywhere. We can find them dropping our kids off at school. We can find them doing a workout at the gym and meeting a new friend. We can find them on a walk or in a new environment, looking at a museum. You know, it's important that you have these good little reinforcements. If you're not feeling like you can, that you're receiving a lot of positive input, put some positive output out there. Start giving people praise and affirmation that you work with. Look at the sticky note, leave one and watch it come back. Actualization is about you getting to your best self. So I hope this PowerPoint today and this presentation helps you think a little bit more about your pathway there. I want to thank everyone for being a part of this and open it up if anybody has any questions at all. No questions, we're good.